Dear listener, the following story is a fictional narrative. However, it contains scenes of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised. Again, this narrative contains graphic violence and may not be suitable for all audiences. With that done, let's get into the story. The story today is I Do Not Believe the Religion That Practice by Fluid Eye 8990. With trickles of sweat slithering down his sunburnt brow, my father struck the open-air pulpit. His voice was dry, made harsh by thirst. And I saith unto you, that the flesh, as it is corrupt. It restrains that which is spiritual, that which is right, a mere buffer between us and our God. Looking around the crowd, it was easy to discern the more devout of his congregation. People's jaw muscles were exposed and brown with age. Skin from others' forearms had been flayed, the fresher wounds covered with a thin layer of gauze. With their heads bowed in prayer, they wore their exposed muscle, like a monk his beads. The smell was always horrific at these ceremonies. Today, we practice the sharing ceremony, and we will showeth the young lamb what it means to be closer to our shepherd. Show her that a sheep's wool is as bad as a wolf's clothing. He cast his skinned hand out at his audience, his eyes seeking the young McGovern girl. Bring her to me. The crowd split open, producing a meek-looking girl. From my knelt position to the left of my father, I judged that by her developing bust, her greasy hair, and the constellation of acne on her face, she couldn't be more than 16. I cringed at the memory of my own ceremony. My father waved his deformed hand, coaxing her nearer. She walked uneasily up to the wooden platform, seeking reassuring eyes in the crowd as she did so. I dared to raise my head, finding a weeping father and a proud, steadfast mother. Like a curious deer, she approached my father with a pronounced caution, and as if to keep her from darting from him, he leaned his tall frame closer to her, his dry, exposed skin cradling her chin. He then spoke in a low tone, one that was deceptively reassuring. My child. I could imagine his yellowed smile. Beneath this flesh. He pinched the loose skin of her arm with his other arm. Beneath this flesh our souls, them which God our Savior hath forged, are restrained. The crowd hummed a unified note. Mr. McGovern's hands covered his face. We, each of us, are fleshy cages, the sinews of sin, this skin of sacrilege, preventing our souls from soaring toward the gates of our true home. The young girl closed her eyes, a tear forming. Oh, cry not for what thou may lose. Rejoice for what thou might gain. At this, Mr. McGovern's sobs became audible, yet went unnoticed by his wife, whose eyes were starstruck by my father's words. It is therefore our duty to build strength enough to remove the layers which restrain us. My father's demeanor changed, his smile vanishing as he grabbed and turned her away from him, ripping the back of her dress wide open, exposing a virgin white canvas, a single mole nestled atop her left shoulder blade. The young girl squealed, her arms rushing to protect her modesty. Her eyes darted to her mother, who smiled with a pronounced pride. Realizing there was no comfort or rescue, she turned her head to face the gentle flowing of the shore. The girl startled when my father continued, his voice loud and demanding. "Speak, lamb. Let us know that you seek God, uncensored, unburdened, and unrestricted." My father leaned closer to her ear from behind her. The crowd waited in anticipation, the sand-encrusted wind brushing the hats off a man at the back of the congregation, who watched on in devout ignorance. My father's voice boomed, making me jump slightly in my knelt position. "I saith unto you once more, speak, lamb. Remember that thou art a lion before thine wool, that thou hast a voice which wishes to roar for God." The girl's eyes looked toward her mother once, who stood proud. She craned her neck away. A skinless section there demonstrated her position within the congregation. Turning to face her daughter, she nodded. The girl's voice trembled. Tears began to fall. "I hear my muffled voice, and hear that the Lord shall not hear me in mine state." "Louder." My father's voice became sweet. She repeated it louder. "I said louder, lamb." The girl squirmed before screaming the phrase. "I hear my muffled voice, and hear that the Lord shall not hear me in mine state." The audience and I hummed a high resonant note, before we, in unison, replied the practiced response. "Remove thine blockades, and sing to the heavens as one of God's pride." My father crouched to the girl, his skinned hand stretching around to the front of her face, forcefully grabbing her chin, and spoke with what seemed like admiration. "Respond, please, my child." The girl shouted, tears streaming down her face. "I beseech thee, help me of mine removal of these fleshly barriers. Allow my screams to be heard, so that he will knoweth of my strength, my love, and devotion to him." My father stood upright then, his raw jaw, tendons straight and exposed, crusty from years that passed over them, seemed to curl slightly. He raised his arms to the skies. "We welcome Samantha into our pride. We shear the wool so that the lion may roar." The crowd howled in response. Whistles and hoots filled the coastal air, some almost salivating from religious ecstasy. My father walked across the wooden platform and bent to unfurl his leather satchel. From it he produced a bronze cleaver. That thing always gave me a fearful shiver. Knowing I'd inherit the damn thing made it worse. My father gripped the handle, cringing at first, but biting his lip in satisfaction as the thorns on the handle sank into his skin. Once it was comfortable, he walked over to the girl and spoke with a pronounced pain. "Speaketh unto me, and unto thine kin. What wool doth the lamb wish to shear?" The girl looked pale, but no longer shaking, she whispered, "The skin of mine back." The father shouted his question louder, demanding an answer that he not only knew the answer to, but one which he had chose for her. "Mine back!" At this, I stood up from my kneeling position. My bag hung heavily in my sweaty hand. I needed to be ready. I had to be. Her mother and father were called to the stage. Mr. McGovern was reluctant to go, but after a well-placed slap at the back of his head, he became compliant. Her mother took her daughter's right shoulder, while her father took the left, stretching the skin tautly across the young girl's back. Mr. McGovern whispered apologies to his crying daughter, while his wife looked up at my father in an almost romantical light. "I shear thine wool." My father's voice served as for further ignition to the increasingly wilder congregation. thine barrier, thine flesh will be sheared and burnt, so that the devil shall know that his cages shall not confine. You, who are no longer a lamb, will know thine God better in thine pain, and in thine aching the miracle will become clear. I knelt to the left of my father and opened the bag. As the girl nodded, her eyes closed in fearful anticipation. The shear, bronze and sharp, had an odd design. It looked like a cleaver that had an S-shaped blade rather than the ordinary rectangular one. Its spine was decorated with bronze abominations of lions bursting from beneath the flesh of lambs. Its handle, also entirely bronze, had thorns extending along its length in sporadic directions. It was an odd instrument, but nonetheless effective. Its curved blade scraped the flesh off quickly. Blood slid off its face with no resistance. As our creed prescribed, my father spent hours in his quarters honing its blade. The climax of the ceremony lasted 30 loud, painful seconds, louder than her screams. My father spoke to his near animalistic congregation. Our companion may whimper if she must. This will pass, and upon its passing, she too shall see the light of our pride, the light of that which is righteous and true. Turning to the young Welling McGovern girl, he continued, And thou shalt be made full of gratitude, that thou art no longer a lamb, but a lion. At this I ran to the girl and began to bandage the wound. It was so that the girl would not bleed to death, as is my responsibility. It will be my duty to anoint the wound. The oil my creed uses delays rotting of the exposed muscle. It also deters infections and insects. If permitted, it would have been a great addition to the war effort. With the wound bound, I handed my father the strip of flesh which had fallen to the floor. I bent the knee and bowed my head, as is custom. I awaited for his words, trying my best to remember my forthcoming response over the wild howls of the congregation and the pained moans of the girl behind me. The flesh has been sheared. Rejoice, for our pride grows. He turned from his adoring crowd of the mad and frantic and faced me. Exquisite anointer, baptize her with the waters of her new life. I looked up when my official title had been spoken, and with a fumbling tongue I answered, In thine wisdom, in thine truth, in our expectation of holy deliverance, I will anoint the newly sheared. My father's eyes met mine. In them, I knew he noticed my mistake within the response. He turned from me almost immediately. His heavy footfall fell loudly on the wooden steps that descended from the stage. I returned to my bag, extracting the mixture of salt, sand, and water. I sprinkled the cocktail over the freshly covered wound, hardly noticing the screams of Samantha McGovern, nor the adoring stare of her mother, who watched as my father disappeared into our seaside shack. End of story. Once again, a big thank you to the author who shared this story with us. If it wasn't for authors like FluidEye8990, I would not have anything to read. So once again, a big thank you to them. You can find a link to their story and to their account in the description. And thank you guys so much for listening. Goodbye.